Kia ora and welcome to Workers' Voice. Spend the next hour with us as we discuss the tribulations and triumphs of building workers' rights and increasing fairness in the workplace. This show is produced by Unite Union.
Kia ora and welcome to Workers' Voice. I'm Nadia Abu-Shanab and I'm your host for today. I'm an organiser at Unite Union and we're joined by a very, very special guest today. That's Ben Peterson. He is also an organiser from Unite Union. Do you want to give us a little hello, Ben?
G'day, how's it going?
G'day, Ben. Where are you from?
I'm originally from Australia, but I've been working for Unite on the South Island for the last couple of years.
Okay, cool. So today we're going to be talking. Ben's going to be trying to make history interesting for us. That's the challenge. That's the gauntlet, and we've thrown it down. Are you going to be able to make union history interesting?
We'll find out soon enough, won't we?
We will find out. Okay, first of all, we're just going to have a song. We're going to have a little bit of 9 to 5 just to get us started. This is Workers' Voice. The show is produced by Unite Union. Not all our workers work 9 to 5, but let's crank it first and then we'll get going.
Tumble out of bed and I stumble to the kitchen, pour myself a cup of ambition and yawn and stretch and try to come to life. Jump in the shower and the blood starts pumping. Out on the streets the traffic starts jumping with folks like me on the job from 9 to 5. Working 9 to 5, what a way to make a living, barely getting by. It's all taking and no giving. They just use your mind and they never give you credit. It's enough to drive you crazy and you're ready. 9 to 5 for service and devotion. You would think that I would deserve a fair promotion. Want to move ahead, but the boss won't seem to let me. I swear sometimes that man is out to get me. They let you dream just to watch him shatter. You're just a step on the boss man's ladder, but you got dreams he'll never take away. In the same boat with a lot of your friends, waiting for the day your ship will come in and the tide's gonna turn and it's all gonna roll your way. Working 9 to 5, what a way to make a living, barely getting by. It's all taking and no giving. They just use your mind and you never get the credit. It's enough to drive you crazy if you let it. 9 to 5, yeah, they got you where they want you. There's a better life, and you think about it, don't you? It's a rich man's game, no matter what they call it. And you spend your life putting money in his wallet. 9 to 5, what a way to make a living, barely getting by. It's all taking and no giving. They just use your mind and they never give you credit. It's enough to drive you crazy if you let it. 9 to 5, yeah, they got you where they want you. There's a better life, and you dream about it, don't you? It's a rich man's game, no matter what they call it. And you spend your life putting money in his wallet. 9 to 5, working 9 to 5.
Okay, Ben, so thank you for joining us in the studio today. You've just come up to Auckland, have you?
Yeah, just moved up in the last couple of days, so I'll be around these parts more often.
Awesome. I'm hoping you can come on the show a little bit more. Okay, so today I want to talk a bit about, you're interested in union history, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, right. Okay, because I find that can often be a really dry topic. Yeah. Like I don't like the old union songs, I have to be frank. But I think there are probably interesting things that we can learn from union history. Why don't you first of all just start off by telling us, you know, why you're interested in union history and why you think the history of collective struggle is important?
I think there's a range of reasons why it's useful to think about and to know a bit of union history. I think for most of us, it is our history. Like, we are working people and we work today, and the reason work looks like it does is because there's been unions and stuff in the past. And I think it's really interesting for me when you look at historical sort of stuff as well, that often you see a lot of echoes, I suppose, of history. And the issues that we face today are things that have been taken up and been issues that have been challenged and sometimes won in the past. So, yeah, I think in terms of understanding our rights and work today and getting ideas for how we can challenge things when things aren't happening as well as we'd like, there's often some really interesting examples and interesting things from history that we can learn from.
Yeah, definitely. I actually agree with that. And I think there's probably something interesting about as well. It's not just the struggle around work, but I mean, so many workers' struggles that have happened throughout history are actually struggles around community, around livelihood, around so many things, or whether they're actually feminist struggles or struggles around race.
Yeah,
so many
absolutely.
of those things have come into our collective kind of experiences in work as well. So
I think there's a lot of stuff like that you wouldn't necessarily think about, and things like it's the simple things like workingmen's clubs that exist in just about every suburb and little town. These were things that weren't just established. They were established by unions and established by collective people wanting to have a space where working people to get together and have a good time. And I think we should view our work as that sort of stuff as well. It's not somewhere where you just go to get the money that you need to survive, but we should view our workmates and our workplaces as the basis of our lives and things as well, and we shouldn't be afraid of trying to link our unions and our union struggles into our day-to-day other stuff that we come up with, and that's absolutely something that comes through in history. Okay.
And you're I know a little birdie has told me that you actually have you have a few tattoos. Do you have a tattoo? You're looking at me like you're very annoyed. Do you have a tattoo which relates to union history?
Yeah, you could say that. This is probably thrilling radio. Yeah.
We're learning a bit about our co-host.
That's fair enough.
Yep. So what have you got?
Oh, well, I've got Liberty, Equality, Fraternity tattooed on my shoulder, but I've also got on my back the Eureka Stockade flag, which was a very important sort of symbol in Australian labour history for the miners there, rising up against what was really unfair taxation at the time. There was the gold rush in Australia, and the miners were expected to pay for licences, which were really expensive and really unaffordable for a lot of the miners. Like, most miners didn't find massive amounts of gold. Some did, but most didn't. And there was a sort of a way from the government to try and force people back into working for the big farms at the time, because they were really worried about all their workers going off to the gold mines, because why would you work for not very good wages when you can go and have a chance to win big in the mining areas? So there was this big uprising by the miners, and that was really successful in taking forwards, getting better conditions, and the mining licence costs were reduced, but then it also had other effects politically, like the miners won election and the right to have elections and for working people, which was the first time in that. And it had real ramifications internationally and stuff as well, and we see historically the very strong links between Australia and New Zealand. So in New Zealand labour history, the mines on the west coast were one of the places where unions were very strong and very first places to get strong unions, and a lot of those people learnt their unionism in Australia and the mines there. So there's a lot of stuff in that that flag and that symbol is a very important one, both here and in Australia.
I got so excited by that story of union history that I sneezed. Okay, so I have a question for you. If you could point to one working class hero or someone in the history of unions that you think people should know about, who would it be?
There's a lot of really interesting people, and in New Zealand sort of history there's a lot of individuals that did stuff, I think, and a lot of people that moved through and went to different countries. But I think sometimes looking for individuals can be a little bit counterintuitive.
Oh, I was kind of hoping you'd go there with this one.
Well, that's it, because I think that's the thing is there's a lot of people that don't necessarily make the books, and I think important part of our labour history is viewing, its entire industries and hundreds of people and thousands of people have been involved, and often mainstream histories and official histories then reduce all that to the roles of a couple of people. But even those individuals are only as strong as, you know, the sites or the workplaces and the communities that sort of led to those struggles taking place. So, for example, like the Black Ball strike in 1908 was very significant in a range of things for it politically and industrially and in terms of workplace rights. But that wasn't, and historically, if you read about that, you'll read about people like Bob Semple and others who went on to play very big roles in the Labor Party. But to understand that, you've got to look at the West Coast community and the miners, and there's thousands of people who you don't sort of see reflected in a lot of those histories. And I think that's important, that we should, every one of us can be look back in history and see people that were just like us. You know, they might not have worked in fast food or at Countdown or something like that, but it was people working hard jobs and people, that collective strength, which made those famous things possible.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I tend to agree. You know, like everyone knows about, for example, Martin Luther King, but not many people know about the group of black women in Alabama that stayed up all night screen printing flyers to promote the first bus boycott. And so I think there's something to be said there about, you know, when we fixate quite heavily on individuals. I mean, there are definitely some amazing individuals that have done some amazing work, but they've done it collectively with others alongside them, whose contributions sometimes are kind of invisibilised, which is a bit of a shame. But so there's no one, even okay, with that caveat aside, there's no one that you'd say you think is an interesting person for people to read about, learn about, know about.
Oh, there's lots of people. I think it's more interesting to look at overall struggles, because I think also individuals can play different roles at different times. So some of the people that played, it's interesting looking at like the Labor Party and a lot of their early years, and the people that played really interesting roles in, say, government, or in the First World War, a lot of unions were heavily involved in stuff against conscription, against forcing people to go fight overseas. But then a lot of those people who played really interesting roles as individuals in that time, then by the Second World War were enforcing conscription themselves. So I think it's interesting to look at the events and the things, and also if looking at individuals, it's worth having a well-rounded sort of understanding of their role and the way they change over time and stuff as well.
There was one story you shared with us, though. You did share a story with the other Unite organisers about how a group of, was it organisers, had gotten, how they'd managed to get a fleet of cars.
Oh, well...
You should tell that story.
It was, this was in the miners in Newcastle in Australia, which is just an area north of Sydney, and there's a big mining communities there in the Hunter Valley. And they were campaigning, the government at the time was trying to ban the Communist Party, which was very significant because lots of communists were very involved in unions, particularly in this area. And so it was a very important sort of democratic and civil rights issue to sort of stop that ban. But the campaign was really struggling because they they didn't have the resources they needed. In particular, they didn't have a car. They were sort of carrying things around and needing to borrow and beg and steal lifts off people to get around to different sites to campaign against this.
That's like me at the moment with my car broken down.
Well, maybe the way they fixed it at this time was they got someone who was in the site and, old mate, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he intentionally got his finger caught in one of the machines and had his finger cut off intentionally, because in the union contract there was a compensation for lost certain limbs, and if you lost a finger, you got about $5,000, and that was enough to buy the car. So they got together and made the decision that someone needed to lose a finger for the good of the cause, because they needed that money for a car, and that was the decision that was made. And this one bloke was the poor guy who got the short straw and the short finger as well, by the sounds of it. But that was what was necessary, and that's what got them the resources, and ultimately that campaign against those laws was successful, and they were able to stop them coming into place, which was really significant. So I'm not suggesting anyone does that to finance their campaigning today, but it's those sort of sacrifices that have got us to the better conditions we have today, I suppose.
Cool, that's good. That's a good story. All right, well, that's a nice segue into our song Working Class Hero.
As soon as you're born, they make you feel small. by giving you no time instead of it all. Till the pain is so big you feel nothing at all. A working class hero is something to be. A working class hero is something to be. They hurt you at home and they hit you at school. They hate you if you're clever and they despise a fool. Till you're so fucking crazy you can't follow their rules. A working class hero is something to be. A working class hero is something to be. When they've tortured and scared you for 20-odd years, then they expect you to pick a career. When you can't really function, you're so full of fear. A working class hero is something to be. A working class hero is something to be. Keep you doped with religion and sex and TV. And you think you're so clever and classless and free. But you're still fucking peasants as far as I can see. A working class hero is something to be. A working class hero is something to be. There's room at the top, they are telling you still. But first you must learn how to smile as you kill. If you want to be like the folks on the hill. A working class hero is something to be. A working class hero is something to be. If you want to be a hero, well, just follow me. If you want to be a hero, well, just follow me.
Okay, so Ben, you're from Australia. Now, when I usually think about Australia, what do I think about? Racists. No, there are sort of like competing or overlapping histories within Australia, I guess, of interesting people doing interesting things and interesting struggles, but also there's a lot of other things about Australia that we know about and from a New Zealand perspective, sort of dislike. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit about I mean, I don't like the tendency for us always to be like, oh, we have to learn things from Australia, because I think Australia can learn things from New Zealand's struggle. I think that we can learn things from international struggle everywhere. But is there anything in particular that you think, having seen in Australia or even something historical, that you think is relevant to where we are now and where we want to go?
Yeah, I think there's lots of overlapping histories. I think it's really interesting historically in terms of union stuff. There was a lot of people moving from Australia to New Zealand and vice versa. And I think you often see that with when we look at sort of class histories rather than national ones. We do see that as a lot as well. Like people, a lot of a lot of radicals throughout history have started off in one country and had to leave there because whether it was through unionism or political activism, they had to become exiles and they moved somewhere else and get involved in the movement there. And I think it's important for our part of our history as in unionists to sort of have a very international perspective and and recognise that taking up issues in one place has real ramifications elsewhere. And we even see that today, like the Arab Spring sort of phenomenon sort of spurred stuff in Greece and in Spain, and then Occupy movements here. And not that all these things always lead to sort of successful stuff, but when working class people stand up in one area, that inspires people elsewhere. In terms of that being said, we do have national histories and stuff like that are specific to people and places and times. And in Australia, I think there's like a range of things. I think, there's sort of a very strong fight for the 8-hour day and stuff like that, and there's sort of things which are very similar to New Zealand.
So what came before the 8-hour day, do you know? Well,
there was not many hour days was there before 8-hour days. I think as I'm sure all of us or a lot of us are aware today, that bosses often want you to hang around for a few minutes after your shift just to help out for a few extra things and get that little bit of extra work. But before unions and before we'd organised and won the 8-hour day as a sort of standard thing, there was no sort of like limits to what you would be expected to work, and you'd be paid by the day, and that would be sort of from sun up to sundown, and to sort of claim that ownership over your right to actually have time off to spend with family and friends and rest and do other things or study or whatever was a very important thing, and that was only won by people getting together and being organised and saying, actually, enough's enough, we're going to work 8 hours, and then we're going to have, well, the old slogan was 8 hours work, 8 hours rest, 8 hours play. And that's a pretty good thing to aspire to. I think it's something we need to think about more, because increasingly today, because wages are so slow, we'll sort of see a lot of people. I know a lot of our members in fast foods work 2 or sometimes 3 jobs to get the money to make do. Part of that is we need to expect more and get the companies that employ us to pay proper wages, and then also need to make sure that other companies that are selling things to us aren't ripping us off. But it's something it's been achieved in the past, and we can achieve it again.
Yeah, no, I've heard recently that in Sweden they've... it's actually not... I mean, it's a bit of a deceptive thing when you see the meme, but apparently they've got a 6-hour day going for some people now, 6-hour working day for certain groups. But when I talked to my Swedish friend about it, he said it's not for everyone. It's just for certain sectors and certain things. But, certainly, there's arguments to be had there, and even just at its core, that thing about, well, we don't want to spend all our lives at work, One of my members was in trouble recently, and just for taking leave to spend time with her family who was sick, and she was asked, look, what's more important to you, your family or your career? And she sort of said, look, actually, the only reason I'm really here is to sustain the life that I need for my kids. So, it's sort of this thing, this pull of, you need to be here all the time. This needs to be your entire life. And I think that's an internal kind of tension, right? That we want to be like, actually, we have lives. We want to spend times with our family. We want to enjoy ourselves. We want to be able to live off the wages that we make, and so on and so on. So in terms of Australia, is there anything else that you think is, particularly significant? So the struggle for the 8-hour day. Anything else?
There's a range of...
Because they have good, like, generally. I mean, there's an onslaught now, but sort of better work rights in Australia than we do here, do you reckon, at a base level?
It's different. There's a lot of... So Australia's got a system called the award system, where there's basically minimum wages set by industry. So the minimum wage for a retail worker is different to the minimum wage for someone who works in construction and stuff, and that's legally enforceable. And that's a system that did exist in New Zealand up until 1991. And the positive, and then at that point, that's when the National Party at the time, that were in government, and introduced what was called the Employment Contracts Act, which removed these these systems. Why that was important is because it meant that like unions and when we had workplace organisation, it was able to extend conditions across a whole industry. So where unions are strong if it was dangerous work and that sort of stuff, for example, then unions and where workers were well organised are able to make sure that there was across that whole industry, everyone got protected by appropriate conditions and stuff. And because that was sort of set by government with input from unions and stuff, they were able to then improve that and make sure that kept up with inflation and stuff like that. Since that's gone, and since it's just been in New Zealand, it's just all been completely removed. It just means there's this race to the bottom, and it means that, say, smaller work sites will pay less, and then that helps force down an entire industry's sort of wages and pits people against each other, and it removes that sort of protection. In Australia, there's still the award system. It's perfectly possible for governments to organise like that, and to our industries to be organised like that. And I think it's worth keeping in mind because it's in New Zealand, there's companies always tell us, it says in Unite all the time that there's not much money and the fast food companies aren't making much money or whatever. But when you look at Australia, it's the same sort of situation, but the wages are 20% more, 25% more. We don't be afraid to sort of call out managers or companies and stuff that sort of claim that they can't afford to do it, because across the ditch they definitely can afford to pay people a bit better. Yeah. It comes down to whether or not we can enforce that on them.
Yeah, definitely. And so what about, because also in Oz there's things like penal rates, right? So if you work on the weekend, there's a recognition that, you're probably spending time away from your kids that may be in school or whatever, and that you get some kind of extra money for coming in during that time that's outside of normal work hours. So it's penal rates on the weekends, that's right? Yeah,
penal rates on weekends, and overtime sort of stuff's a lot more structured in Australia than it is here. So if you work more than a 40-hour week, you do get your overtime, and and these things are really important and good. There's some stuff that's better here than in Australia. So in Australia, if you're casual, you don't get paid your holiday pay.
But you have to get a higher rate.
But you do get a higher rate. So there's different sort of things. There's some stuff that's better in New Zealand. I think arguably like the holiday rate is, or holiday pay is one aspect of that. But I also think, some stuff around union organising is slightly stronger here than in Australia. But I think it comes down to, and I think one of the lessons in Australia, even though it is a bit better than it is in New Zealand, the trend is down. And so the government at the moment in Australia is trying to attack the penalty rates.
Yeah.
Wages have decreased as proportionally to profits in Australia as it has in New Zealand. Inequality is on the rise there as it is here. In all cases, it comes down to what we can fight for as the sort of the conditions that we get. In Australia, the fought for and some of the unions have been able to defend things a bit better than they have here. But to change that balance of forces and to change that balance, if we can get unions stronger here and more organised people here on our side of the spectrum, then we'll get better conditions as well.
Definitely. All right. We're going to move into our next song now, which is Gil Scott-Heron, Home is Where the Hatred Is. I love this song.
If I never went home again. Stand as far away from me as you can and ask me why. Hang on to your roast beef, close your eyes to watch me die. You keep saying, kick it, quit it. Kick it, quit it, God, but did you ever try to turn your sick soul inside out so that the world, so that the world can watch you die.
So we were just having a little catch-up then in that song, and I said, you know, look, is there anything else you think is important about union history in Australia that should be mentioned? And you were thinking you were going to maybe say something about breaks. I think that's important because breaks are good, right?
Breaks are good, yeah. And we didn't necessarily get them. And I suppose this story's from New Zealand, actually, in Blackball, the Blackball strike, which I mentioned a bit before, which is Blackball's a mining town and was a mining or a coal mine on the west coast of the South Island. And it was a famous strike in 1908 there, and it seems very old-fashioned and a bit not necessarily sure why, you know, in the immediate sense you sort of think, well, why is this relevant to us today? But the key thing that kicked off the strike and the action there was breaks. So in the mine there was a range of issues that weren't very good. So pay was horrible, the bosses were really, evil and really petty to people. The company that owned the mine owned the whole town that all the workers lived in, so they had to pay back their rent to the company, and it was a really vicious place and really vicious sort of workplace, very dangerous work and stuff. And the key thing that the union had been organising there for some time, but at the time there was a legal system called arbitration where unions would not go on strike, were illegal for them to go on strike or to take action, but they had a court where they could make a case and appeal to, and the employers would make their appeal, and that court would arbitrate and decide on what was reasonable. But this had worked for a little while and been able to keep a cap on strikes happening and stuff. But for these workers in Blackball for quite many years, they'd been building up this sort of resentment where pay hadn't been improving and conditions had been getting worse and worse, and it just being really hard work sort of reached the point where they weren't able to bear it anymore. And so the union leadership made a decision they were going to make an issue around breaks, which is quite an interesting thing. And I think it's interesting, for people in the workplace today to think about that, where often we'll be in a workplace where the pay will be really crappy and the managers will be really intense and not very fair.
Are you trying to go through all this without swearing?
Oh, I'm doing my best. I've sometimes got a little bit of a floral vocabulary, we'll say, but yeah, you'll be in a situation where your managers won't be ideal and your workplace won't be great, but you can't necessarily go on strike like legally, and if you're in one store and you're a bit isolated, you can't sort of take it all up at once. But if you look through your contract, you can often find little things which you can use to sort of wage war, we'll say, you know, like, or take up issues to try and turn the balance back in your favour. And so breaks can be a really good one, making sure that you and all your workmates get your breaks, making sure that you're getting paid the right rates in your contracts can be stuff. So it can be a really effective way of taking up issues if you're in a workplace where you think you're getting treated unfairly. But anyway, at Blackball, when they had this sort of strike, it kicked off where they decided that everyone was entitled to a half-hour break. At the time, you'd be working 8-10-hour days and you'd only get a half-hour break in the middle of it. A 15-minute break. And, you know, working in a coal mine, underground all day, really dangerous conditions, and really this is with a shovel digging tons and tons of coal each day out. People weren't very enthused, and 15 minutes isn't much time, so they decided they were going to take a half-hour break. So the famous sort of story is that I think it was Paddy Webb was the miner who was chosen to be the one to take the extra break, and he got to the end of his 15 minutes. It was crib time, was what they called it. The foreman came up and said, "You've had your time, Pad," and he said, "Well, I've got to finish my pie." So it's all about a pie.
I actually was wondering if there was anything about a pie in this story, and there was.
Well,
so there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's it. The revolutionary potential.
What kind of pie was it, though? That's the question.
I don't know. I don't think history has recorded the type of pie. So we can guess. We could say it could have been a rhubarb and custard pie. It could have been a
I was thinking savoury. I was thinking savoury.
Well, you know, I think, you know, sometimes there's the sweet tooth. You know, sometimes it kicks you on a little bit. You get a bit of a sugar rush before you're back to the coal mine. At any rate, the pie was what kicked it off, and they went out for 6 weeks, this strike, and it was significant because it was the first strike in quite a while, and it was breaking with this system where you go to the court, and it really showed out the court was sort of set up in the employer's favour. And so there was a famous story where they went and they'd all been hauled to the court to explain themselves why they're on strike and they meant to make their case, and the arbitration judge, the miners made their case to the judge and said it's really unfair, we need at least a half hour for our lunch. And the arbitration judge said this is ridiculous, this is outrageous, 15 minutes is plenty of time for anyone to have a lunch, any workman to have a lunch. And at that point he knocked on the door or he knocked on the thing and called the court to go out for lunch, and he said it was an hour and a half. Because apparently judges need an hour and a half, but a coal miner only needs 15 minutes.
Of course they do.
So yeah, it was an interesting sort of thing, and it was about breaks. But this is how we've got breaks today. It was through unions taking it up and taking up these little things, and this strike was ultimately successful. It took 6 weeks, and they had to sort of all stayed out, and they all stayed strong, and the whole town sort of came together. And it was a long time, and it was very difficult, but it won these breaks, and that sort of helped set the groundwork, which we still enjoy today. So every time you're having your half and sitting down and having a pie, just think of the Blackball miners, because that's where it all came from.
Cool, good stuff. All right, we're just going to move into our next song now, which is The Coup, and it's Guillotine.
We know you could've stayed home, just cried and cussed me, or your guns go off if it's time to bust me, or they tanks have time to rust. They got the army turning bullets into gold. They got the hookers turning tricks into cold. And every time the police kicks in the dough, an angel gas breaks dips in the O. And even if a D-boy flips in my O, it ain't enough to buy shit anymore. Sleep in the doorway, piss on the floor. Look in the sky, wait for missiles to show. It's finna blow, cause they got the TV, we got the truth. They own the judges and we got the proof. We got hella people, they got helicopters. They got the bombs and we got the guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run. Talk about show. Be about talk about show. Be about I just spit the dope lines. I don't snort them. Tell the boss, call police to escort them. You don't ride out them lines, you just quote them. Get offline, plug into this modem. No, you can't outvote them. The rules are still golden. On the jewels we holdin' if we guardin' our scrollin'. If you press the ear to the turf that is stolen, you can hear the sound of limitations exploding. Please, sir, may we have another portion? We're children of the beast that dodged the abortion. Neck placed firm between the floor and the portion. We'll shut your shit down, don't call it extortion. Caution, we're coming for your head. So call the feds and get files and shred. Every textbook read said bring you the bread. But guess what, we got you instead. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine.
Right, so that story about the black ball miners kind of got me thinking about this idea of aspirations, right? Because when you're working and you're in a certain situation, you kind of aspire to what you have, right? Or just something slightly beyond that. Mm-hmm. It's kind of hard to have ideas for something really different when it's an experience you haven't had. So, of course, you know, the judges in Blackball were saying 15 minutes is plenty of time, you know, like that was the normal of that point. And now obviously you wouldn't even have to have that argument. Oh, actually I think people are having those arguments. I think in hospitality, in deunionised workplaces, people are probably having those arguments all the time. But certainly in a lot of sectors, you can go in, you know you're going to have your break, you know how long your break is going to be, whether it's half an hour or an hour, and you wouldn't need to have that discussion. Mm. So thinking about aspirations, are there any other kind of interesting stories or anything that you think is important to say on the subject of people having quite aspirations that initially start out as seeming quite wild and quite sort of distant, that people have achieved, or even things that you think that we should be aspiring to right now?
I think it's always worth dreaming big, because I think if you look at the black ball sort of situation, the people who ran that strike were socialists, and black ball is remembered in significant there's been lots of strikes historically in New Zealand, and it's not necessarily that significant in and of itself, but its political ramifications were huge. So the people who led that strike and the leadership at Blackball then helped create the Labor Party, and those sort of militants and the people who, and then also the Federation of Labor, which was strongly influenced by really radical ideas. And so they went on strike for a 15-minute break, but it was about a lot more than that. It was about, these were people who believed that working people should run the world. And I think in terms of our aspirations, I think that's a really good starting point when we dream of stuff. Because I think if we're fighting just for 15-minute breaks or just for an extra 10 cents in the pay negotiations or whatever, then ultimately, yeah, that's not the most exciting thing in the world. And then when you achieve it, then what? But I think in terms of the union movement, I think that's part of the thing for the union movement today is it's lost its ability to dream in some ways. I think that we need to have a starting point in the abstract, at least, of that we do think that working people could run the world. And I think that's historically not just at Blackball, but if we look through union histories and our histories, it's people who, believed in much bigger ideals than just what was immediately apparent leading these struggles. I think you talked a bit earlier about Martin Luther King and the sort of the civil rights sort of struggles, and it was that I think black people in the US really wanted to be able to, Rosa Parks wanted to be able to catch a bus, but she had much bigger things as well, that she wanted, a really human, liberation for people, and for black people in particular, but all people. There's strong links between the civil rights movement and really radical organisations and people, and having that sort of broader dream helps take things forward. And I think that's a really good starting point. And not being afraid to sort of like politicise stuff and to talk about bigger issues and to talk about the fundamental injustices of the economy and the society that we're in. Because when we can sort of understand those things, it makes it a lot easier to fight for little things as a step towards that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And that's an important point, actually. Okay, last little question. I don't really like union songs, and I said that. I put that out there. But I thought it was interesting because I was reading something recently which was, it was an old historical quote. I can't actually remember who it was by. But the point was that it was something within union history, and the point that was being made was that you can read a pamphlet and read it once, but if you've got a song, you can sing it 100 times or whatever. Now, I've got a song on the list called The Night Watchman, is that it? The union song? Yeah? Yep. Okay. So what do you think? We're going to play that. We're going to play that in a minute, but first of all, I want to ask you what you think about union songs. Straight up.
There's all sorts of old history and stuff, but I think with culture's living, and I think when Occupy was happening a few years ago, there was all sorts of bands and people that put out stuff. I think you look at things like hip-hop today, that people that are putting forward songs that talk about politics or Black Lives Matter, and there's a lot of stuff out there. That's the union song today. So I think it's interesting, and I can kind of get into it because I'm a bit of a lefty nerd. But yeah, I think culture's a living thing, and I think if we're having struggles and stuff, then the culture, the artists will be doing things about it. I'm not an artist, so I'm not going to be writing any new songs, but I'll certainly awkwardly dance to them at the back of the hall. Yeah. So
do you think there's a place for these sort of like historical songs? Do you think we should still be singing old songs that were being sung 100 years ago? Should we be updating them? Is that up to people? What do you reckon?
Well, yeah, I know that I'm not the person to be lecturing people on culture. As far as I'm concerned, listening to Cold Chisel and just putting Working Class Man by Jimmy Barnes on repeat is fine, but I'm not also most people, so I'll leave that to other hip young kids to come up with the thing.
All right. Let's listen to this union song, shall we? It's The Night Watchman. Yeah.
Here we go. For the fight all the workers who are twisted, tricked, and robbed. To the peasant in Guatemala, in a sweatshop got your job. And she can't feed a family on the pennies that she makes. Meanwhile, the crime rate's rising up and down the Great Lakes states. Like vegetables left in the field, the signatures smell rotten. And the contracts and the deeds that push the race down to the bottom. They load the rubber bullets, they fire another round. I'm heading to the tear gas. Dig in, man, hold your ground. For Joe Hill and Cesar Chavez, who fought in their own time. For our brothers and our sisters up and down that picket line. For the unnamed and unnumbered who struggle brave and long. For the union men and women standing up and standing strong. Yep. That's right. Nos queremos juntos, vamos a ganar. See, y'all hit 'em where it hurts and bite the hand that feeds. You might get 1 to 3 or probation and a fine. Well, I know where I'm gonna be. I'm gonna be right on that front line for Joe Hill and Cesar Chavez, who fought in their own time. For our brothers and our sisters up and down that picket line. For the unnamed and unnumbered who struggle brave and long. For the union men and women standing up and standing strong. Yep. That's what I'm talking about. Dirty scabs will cross the line while others stand aside and look. But ain't nobody never got nothing that didn't raise a voice and push. Like the steel worker in Ohio, the miner in West Virginia, the teacher in Chicago, janitor in Mississippi. From the sweatshops of L.A. to the fields of Mission Flats, there's a thundercloud exploding, and I'm free at last. Like Joe Hill and Cesar Chavez, who fought in their own time. Like our brothers and our sisters up and down that picket line. Like the unnamed and unnumbered who struggle brave and long. Like the union men and women standing up and standing strong. Like the unnamed and unnumbered who struggle brave and long. Like the union men and women standing up and standing strong. Yep.
So now as an audience, people could have made their minds up about whether we should still be listening to old school union songs. I don't even know how old that song is.
That's only a couple of years old. I've done it.
Oops. It's hard to say, you see. I mean...
That's by Tom Morello. That's the, was the guitarist in Rage Against the Machine.
Oh, okay. That makes me feel bad. That makes me feel bad.
No. But he went and sort of did his individual folk thing, sort of channeling these old songs.
Right,
so,
okay. So it's still got the old school folky vibes.
Yeah. So it's those sort of vibes. But yeah, I think that's a good example. I think it doesn't need to be like either old or new. I think you can channel both. Like Rage Against the Machine, it's showing me age a little bit now, but that's relatively new and was quite cool and very political. But yeah, Tom Morello does his Night Watchman thing and goes off and gets a guitar and channels Joe Hill. So
yeah, and I guess there's artists who talk about collectivism and I mean, sort of struggle and stuff all the time. Yeah. So moving on, we're at the that kind of time of year where you're thinking about going forward. So I'm wondering whether you have any thoughts on, 2016 and the kind of things that the union movement should be looking to achieve in the next year, the next 2 years. We talked about aspirations. So just quickly, because we're coming to the end of the show, but I mean, what do you think people should be? Or what do you think people are aspiring to at this stage?
I think there's a lot that needs to be done. I find it really interesting that in the paper last week there was stuff around inequality growing, and that 29% of kids in New Zealand live in poverty, and something needs to be done about that, and the only thing that's going to change that is better wages. People need to get paid better for the work that they do. So I think the union movement needs to be proactive around that. And I think it's a matter of, like, if employers aren't paying people appropriately, then they're starving kids, and that needs to be brought, you know, out of the shadows and into the light. There's no other policy sort of stuff that's going to change it.
I beg to differ. I'm going to disagree. No, I agree. I think it's part of it, but I think, I think there's two sides as well, because I think probably a proportion of kids living in poverty are the parents of people who are not in work, who can't actually find work. So I think we need to address issues around unemployment as well. So that's living wages for people who can't work and jobs for people who can and do want to work, because at this point unemployment's at 6%, and it's sitting there. And I think we need to remember as well that, and I'm sure you haven't forgotten this, but that, a lot of people will bash on beneficiaries, but we need to be saying actually structural unemployment that was created deliberately by our government, and structural poverty actually exists to the benefit of employers.
Well, that's it. Well, that's unemployment exists to undermine wages. There's been full employment in the past, even relatively recently, like in the late 70s, early 80s, everyone had a job.
There was like 12 people unemployed in New Zealand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's our parents, this is not that long ago that they can give everyone jobs, and they can give jobs that pay. And it doesn't exist now, and it doesn't exist because it's useful for undermining wages to have, that constant threat for low-paid people that if you don't suck it up, then you'll be on the dole queue. Wasn't forgetting that at all. But I think it's about pointing to the government. The government actively chooses to have policies that kick the poor, and we need to kick back.
Yeah, definitely. It was about jobs. It's about living wages. It's about incomes that people can live off, and also just work-life balance, I hope that those are kind of the big, lofty aspirations at this point, but I think Unite did a good job with the 0 hours win in 2015 and actually getting some guaranteed hours for members. Well, members achieved guaranteed hours for themselves in fast food, and I think from there on out it'll be interesting to see what 2016 has in store for Unite and for people's conditions and pay as well. So thank you so much for coming on the show today, Ben. It's been great to have you. Any parting words?
No, it's been grouse.
Grouse, what does that mean?
That's Australian for good.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right, well, thank you very much, Ben. That was a pleasure. And you can listen to our next show next Saturday. So thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Workers' Voice. This show was produced by Unite Union. Listen to us every Saturday, 10:45 a.m. or anytime online at planetaudio.org.nz/Workers' Voice.